jware mum, wage 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 jware mum. Tam je gembe baridu jobra jeba tam je gesu jebe ma nangka dang nyambe senjen tam je dewa dam den dung yao dang de la na me pa yang Dabra zobe chanju rinpoche dobra cha dha la dhava jebe da nobar jebe ge dharba da tam je gembe bhardu jobra jeba dham je ge se jebe ma nangka dang nyambe senjen tam je dewa dham den dung yao dang de la na me pa yang Dambra sobe chanchu rinpoche thombra ja dha la dhamba jebe dha nopar jebe ge tharpa dhan tham je kembe bardu chobra jeba tham je ge se jebe ma nangka dang nyambe senchen tham je dewa dhan den dung dhan de la na me pa ya Tambra zobe chanchu rinpoche thombra je de sama ge bardu lunga yisum ge wala ko mashi bardu lunga yisum ge wala ko de tering ne sonde ne ma san ta sangi bardu lunga yisum ge wala ko Jodam soge jonam la Chancho bardo dane gyabso je dhage jinso gebe sonam ke drala penjer sanje dobra jo sanje jodam soge jonam la Chancho bardo dane gyabso je Dage jinso gebe sonam ke drala penjer sanje dobra jo sanje jodam soge jonam la Chancho bardo dane gyabso je Dage jinso gebe sonam ge drola penche sanje drobra sho manam kadang nyampe senchen tamche dewa dang dewen kendan dambra gyurje dungyang dang dungyang gi gyudan trewa gyurje dungyang mepe dewa dang me dewa gyurje niring chadang nidang dewe dang nyang la nebra gyurje Kadang nyampe senjen tamche dewa dang Dewe gyundan dempra gyurje tungya dang Tungya ki gyudang dewa gyurje tungya mepe dewa dang me dewa gyurje Nering chadang nidang dewe dang nyang la nepra gyurje manang Kadang nyampe senjen tamche dewa dang Dewe gyundan dempra gyurje Dungyao dang dungyao ki gyudan trewa gyurje dungyao mebe dewa dang me trewa gyurje nering chadang nidang trewa dang nyong la nebra gyurje In all the world worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times before each of you lions among humans. I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind by the power of this aspiration to noble deeds. All conquerors appear vividly in my mind with as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands. I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom of Buddha as numerous as atoms, all in the midst of the airs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you gone to bliss with the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense I offer to you conquerors with excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged. I offer to you conquerors these vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors. With the power of conviction in noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind. Under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions, and the heirs of the Buddha solitary realizers here is still in training, and beyond and all wandering beings, you who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. O you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma with palms together. I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, for continent, sun, and moon, I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the 3 kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings with my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence. Please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment, whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching. I now dedicate it all to complete awakening. Om Guru Deva Dakini Rena Mandala Pratija Soha. Durji Chanchen Tele Narodam Mami Tapo Padu Jiten Kun Kadin Sunden Sabe Lame Sham Saju Lama Yidam Chokyong Lasu Vade Soda Yujin Chilo Kim Lengi Dome Sam Lengen Rabe Don Sungyong Lanka So Mega Vadu Jijang Pa Jiten Kun Kusham Lodu Tatu Sam Gyoleme Chinjilo shi tu je je nenge mo pa sem ne kyang sim do de du do pra jen je lo hong jen ju je no chang sang pe ma ge sa thong bo la ya sen jo ge nga do mye pe ma ju ne je shu do ko do kan do mong pu ko ge ge je su da do ge jen je lo je shu su so ko do pe ma se de hong me jo ge ye ge bo da ne do su san je kun ji ngo mo ni ra sen jo ko ngon sun ton se pa Savela me shabla so. So, good morning and good evening to everyone. So, to make some announcements first at the beginning. First thing is these next 2 Saturdays, we will not have class because this upcoming weekend I am going to be in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the Ecumenical Buddhist Society of Little Rock, doing a short weekend retreat in which I will be seeing some people there. If you're interested in joining that particular retreat, it's available through Zoom, only in English. So the information for signing up, maybe if somebody has that information, you can share in the chat link. Then the following Saturday, I will be leading another retreat. That one will not be on Zoom. That one is at the Southern Dharma Retreat Center, which is about an hour away from here. I think I will see some familiar faces there in person as well. So no class this and next Saturday. Yeah, so now let us return to this, the last few verses on this chapter on wisdom. I want to read to you the section in Kempo Kumbel's commentary So we have come to 154, right? 151 to 154 is, to remind everyone again, is Shantideva's pointing in the direction of this topic of the eight worldly concerns. So here again, we often think, oh, eight worldly concerns, eight mundane concerns. Oh, those are, preliminary teachings. Then we think, oh, this perfection of wisdom, this prajna paramita, this wisdom that will free us from suffering. Oh, this profound wisdom of emptiness and this and that, and might get carried away as some of the more finer and more sophisticated presentation of the correct view of emptiness and all of that. That sometimes we get too carried away by that and we forget, wait, why did the Buddha go into such lengths arguing for or explaining or showing to us the truth of emptiness? So that, right, it's not an end unto itself, so that with that understanding of emptiness, with that understanding of the nature of reality, we can be free from the eight mundane concerns. And so Shantideva here finishes up, in a way, finishes up the chapter on wisdom by saying, look, all that you have learned in this chapter on wisdom, they are to free you from the bondage of the eight mundane concerns. And so Kempo Kumpel here, he says, let those who, like the wise master Shantideva, investigate the nature of things, fully understand that all phenomena are like space. Yeah, so remember, because his immediate audience was his colleagues, right? highly educated in Indian philosophical traditions, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. This was just the general education of Nalanda students. Nalanda being like, the greatest university in India of that time, and perhaps even in the world, where people came from all over the place to study there. And so his immediate audience were those people with that kind of background. So throughout this chapter, he used all kinds of different refutations, different arguments, kind of some of these, like I said, arguments are kind of very subtle. Maybe today even hard for us to appreciate, definitely hard if the teacher cannot exactly understand. So I cannot really show you, all the subtle points. So he did what was necessary to convince his immediate audience of what to finally lead to again, if you find that it has been very confusing, some of the sections, this is the point, this is the key point, is that to investigate the nature of things, fully understand. So why you investigate, and all the different ways of investigating the nature of things, so that we fully understand that all phenomena are like space. Back to a very simple analogy. Like space. Nature of phenomena is like space. And this analogy is used by the Buddha in many, many places. And used in, for example, in many of the Vajra songs of the great Mahasiddhas, teaching Mahamudra, will say, nature of phenomena is like space. Nature of mind is like space. Yeah, so here Khenpo Kumpel says, they are like the nature. They are like space. Their nature, nature of all phenomena, nature of all experiences, nature of whatever it is that we experience through the six sense doors, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, intellect. Everything that arises, they have the nature like space. So the nature of space is it's how does Kempo Kumpel elaborate on that? And he says they elude, meaning they cannot be like space, they cannot really be limited by conceptual categories of is and is not. So these conceptual categories of is and is not, if we really look into the basic mechanics of how we experience happiness and suffering, which ironically is how we chase after four of those mundane concerns and run away from the other four of the mundane concerns, right? It all begins with us rigidly, stubbornly committed to is not. This is how it is. This is not how it is. Not in the skillful and wise way of knowing, these are the causes of suffering. These are the causes of happiness. Not in that way, is or is not. Here, is and is not is talking about how when things turn up, that we like, we say, oh yes, this is yeah, definitely like this. And that we don't like, we're like, oh no, this is not, this cannot be. And that kind of rigidity of is and is not. But the nature of all experiences is like space. It doesn't have, it doesn't come predetermined. This is not. This is likable, this is not likable. This is agreeable, this is not agreeable. So Khenpo Kumbel end his commentary on this section and say, let us then regard as equal the 8 mundane concerns. Equal in that, equally, their nature is like space. So in this nature of space, things arise, right? Due to temporary gathering causes and conditions. And that's the key word with when we talk about causes and conditions is temporary. Temporarily, causes and conditions come together. Then particular experiences, particular situations turn up. But they are all very fragile, actually, these conditions, these situations, both those that we like and those that we don't like. Not seeing the temporary nature of these gathering conditions and causes, then we fixate. We fixate and wallow in our suffering when those situations we don't like, experiences we don't like. Or we get lost, enthralled in seeming pleasure or happiness with those situations that we like. With regards to those that we don't like, because of our fixation, we prolong the misery, ironically, because we cannot let go. With regards to things that we like, we try to prolong the good feelings. Unfortunately, somehow, it just turns out the opposite. We cannot prolong. Then, as it slips away, the birth of misery. Then in its wake, when it has completely dissolved those circumstances, we again wallow, swim around in the mud, sinking in the mud, miserable. So this section, 151 to 154, is one side of the effect or one side of how we should utilize these teachings on emptiness, these teachings found in this chapter. So they are for the purpose of giving us more freedom in the midst of the 8 mundane concerns. So that's one side. The other side, the other benefit, so to say, or the other kind of like, if you want to know, right, how much are you skillfully using these teachings, these arguments, this logic presented in this chapter? Well, the other side of that is, Khenpo Kunpel calls it the effortless display of great compassion. So the rest of the verses in this chapter is showing us that other aspect. So here, what we're seeing is so the first, to be free from the 8 world mundane concerns, is one aspect of the benefit of realizing emptiness. The other side is the effortless arising, the effortless display of great compassion. So these are sometimes called the 2 purposes, or the 2 benefits, especially if you are familiar with like deity yoga practice. They say the light goes out and then the light comes back. Then the light goes out again and the light comes back. And then the seed syllable transform into the deity. That time, this light going out once, coming back, going out again, coming back twice. Then sometimes it says, and this fulfills the 2 benefits. What they're talking about is this. First, benefiting yourself. What is the true benefit for yourself? You become more and more free from the 8 mundane concerns. Secondly, benefiting others. What does that mean? Great compassion flows out towards all sentient beings. So great compassion there is not a footnote. Big compassion, a lot of compassion. Chandakirti gives a good definition. It says, great compassion is the compassion that is not bound by subject and object. Boundless compassion. Our ordinary compassion is all based on subject and object. The more emotional types of compassion is all under the power of subject and object, governed by subject object. Oh, I feel bad for them. Oh, I don't want them to suffer. Great compassion is compassion without subject and object. That's the second benefit. So the 2 benefits. So this effortless display of great compassion. So 155. So let me read a few verses from this section. And we will read, let's see, 155 to 157. All are deeply troubled, or else thrilled with joy. They suffer, strive, contend among themselves, slashing, stabbing, injuring each other. They live their lives engulfed in evil and travail. From time to time, they surface in the states of bliss, abandoning themselves to many pleasures, but dying down they fall to suffer torment, long unbearable in the realms of sorrow. Many are the chasms and abysses of existence, where the truth of suchness is not found. All is contradiction, all denial. Suchness in this world is not like this. And so Khenpo Kumpel again, in his commentary, he says, the glorious master Atisha has said that when emptiness is realized, all sin and non-virtue come to an end, and great compassion arises. Therefore, when emptiness is realized, it is the nature of things that great compassion manifests. So here, great compassion is something that arises as we get closer and closer, and ultimately, when we actually awaken, then great compassion manifests, arises naturally. Meanwhile, what kind of compassion can we cultivate? What kind of compassion we should cultivate? The ordinary compassion that is subject to object. Yes? So just because like ordinary compassion is based on subject and object, we don't say, oh, don't practice ordinary compassion. So ordinary compassion is the compassion that is based on subject and object, which is like, oh, may you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, right? Then the second line of the four immeasurables, which is the line for compassion. And may you be free from suffering and causes of suffering. So we recognize that there is suffering. We recognize that there's causes of suffering. And we recognize, we understand, just as I don't want suffering, and I should recognize what the causes of suffering are, then we genuinely wish upon others, genuinely want others to also be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So that is like ordinary compassion. So we have to cultivate that kind of compassion. From that kind of compassion, there's an intermediate kind of compassion. The intermediate kind of compassion begins to add more clarity into the picture. So the first kind of compassion, you can say, yes, it's more like what we normally think of compassion. The emotions are involved, and therefore, some kind of pain is felt in the heart. But from there, we have to move into the intermediate kind of compassion, which is begin to understand that part of the problem of sentient beings and their suffering is how strongly and rigidly that sentient beings uh, get caught up in uh, this view of I, that I exist, and not recognize, for example, that what we call I is the temporary coming together of the five aggregates. That's like the intermediate kind of compassion, which is now that compassion has some clarity to it. Great compassion, the third, is really only possible, so to say, when emptiness is realized. And that's like eighth bhumi. If you want to talk about bodhisattva stages, traditionally said that's eighth bhumi and up, great compassion. So here, therefore, Khenpo Kumpel says, therefore, when emptiness is realized, it is in the nature of things that great compassion now manifests. Yeah, so he says, not realizing that phenomena are empty, and that their reality is beyond all concepts, beyond all conceptuality, then ordinary beings take as real what is unreal. Where there is no selfhood, they project self. Therein lies their delusion. They long for happiness, but they are ignorant of how to attain it. They struggle against all that seems hostile and love and cling to what appears as friendly. Right? And so 155, Shantideva say, all are deeply troubled, or else thrilled with joy. So this is how we swing back and forth, this pendulum. Deeply troubled, thrilled with joy. When thrilled with joy, we have fear that this joy will go away because we know that it never stays. Then, when deeply troubled, somehow we forget that it will go away. Right? This is how strange we are. When we're deeply troubled, we forget, like this is temporary. And then if people come and tell us, oh, this is just temporary, this will change, and we're like, no, it will not. This is really bad. How can you say, my suffering is not real? But then when we have happiness, right? And when we're thrilled with happiness, then we have a lingering remembrance back there. Oh, this will go away. We're like, no, I don't want it to go away. I don't want it to go away. Same person, But when suffering, we think it's forever. When happiness, we're afraid that it is not forever. So all are deeply troubled, or else thrilled with joy. And so because of that, they suffer and strive and contend among themselves to the point of, because we are suffering so much, we will slash, stab, and injure each other. And in order to protect the happiness that we think we have and we know is going to go away, we will also go to the lengths of slashing, stabbing, and injuring each other. And so we live our lives engulfed in this evil of ignorance. It's 155. Yeah, of course, these days, uh, thankfully, luckily, most of us don't literally go slash and stab and injure each other because we are happy or we are sad. Uh, because we're happy, we don't want that happiness to go away. Or because we are sad and so we see no other way out than we cause. But in lesser ways, in not so literally, yes, of course, we slash, we stab, and we injure each other. And all because we are caught up in this ignorance, in this evil. Evil, in Buddhist context, is talking about ignorance, not seeing clearly. So 156, from time to time, we meet, some kind of conditions of happiness, some states of happiness. Then when that happens, we abandon ourselves to the pleasures and completely lose perspective. But then death will come. And death here, this third line of 156 in the translation that I have, it says, but dying, down they fall to suffer torment. And this doesn't need to refer only to, death, where there are funerals and there are lawyers involved, not just death in that way, but whatever situation of pleasure or happiness, when we experience them, we are like in the God realms, But then death comes, as in that will end. But that when that ends, we fall down and we suffer torment, long unbearable in realms of sorrow. Yeah. So when we are with conditions that we like, we are with conditions that we appreciate, whether it's situations, whether it's people, whether it's pets, whether it's jobs, whether it's fame, we get so carried away. But those conditions have their depths because they are conditioned phenomena. So when they fall apart, then down we go to suffer. Again, why does that happen? The evil of ignorance. Okay, sorry. So 157. So many are the chasms and the abysses of existence, of confused existence, where the truth of suchness is not found. 157, first two lines. So when we're in the depths of our suffering, when we're in the depths of our misery, even though the truth of suchness is definitely still there, the truth of suchness, the truth of emptiness, the truth of all phenomena having the nature of space. That's what the truth of suchness is. But during those times, it's hard. It's hard for us to see that. So when things are well, like now, for us, you and me, relatively well, this is where we have to train to see the truth of suchness. But many are the chasms and abysses of confused existence where the truth of suchness is not found. All is contradiction, all denial. Hear this line, all is contradiction, all is denial. Shantideva is not saying that the nature of reality is contradiction, that the nature of reality is denial. He's describing how we feel when we're in the midst of suffering. So when we're in the midst of suffering, sometimes we even think, even what the Buddha taught, that's just all contradiction. Nothing of this makes sense. Then we go into denial. Like previously, we understand, what are the causes of suffering, how suffering comes about. But then again, when we're gripped by suffering, we even deny that. No, this is all pointless, meaningless. But suchness in this world is not like this, meaning, but the nature of things, they are not like that. We can be free. It is not as oppressive as we have turned it into. So 157. Yeah, so let's take a brief break right now. Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum 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 So here, this section, right? These verses, and you say, wait, this is about compassion? Yes, because compassion begins when we begin to recognize, right, the true kind of suffering that we are caught up in. And sometimes, like, we misperceive, what is the real problem. We think that this kind of happiness, or this kind of suffering is the problem, this kind of suffering is the problem, or this kind of suffering is the problem. We don't see. So it's in fact, it's not suffering itself. It's not seeing the causes of suffering. If we only have kind of compassion towards suffering. Or if we only have compassion when suffering already ripens, suffering already is there, that's not enough. The compassion that you feel towards someone when you see them suffering, that is just the starting point. We need to then from there, so that's the first type of compassion that I talked about that you have to cultivate. Then the next type is you have to cultivate an understanding of how that suffering comes, where it comes from, how is it put together. And these verses here, Shantideva is reminding us again where suffering comes from. So it says, have compassion for beings not seeing. First, beings don't see suffering. They try to hide, they try to ignore, they try to be in denial when suffering happens. Then secondly, beings don't see the mechanics of suffering. So have the first kind of compassion, have the second kind of compassion. So here he's helping develop these two kinds of compassion. So 158 to 160, here exceeding all description is the shoreless sea of pain unbearable. Here it is that strength is low and lives are flickering and brief. All activities for the sake of life and health, relief of hunger and of weariness, time consumed in sleep, all accident and injury, and sterile friendships with the childish. Thus life passes quickly, meaningless. True discernment, hard it is to have. How therefore shall we ever find the means to curb the futile wanderings of the mind? So 158, 159, he really calls our attention to how we mindlessly squander away all the opportunities we have for waking up. And yet, we keep investing in this dream. So then 160, he asks, he laments. True discernment, it's so hard to have this. It's so hard to have this. And if we don't have true discernment, if we don't see clearly, however are we going to find a way to curb the futile wanderings of the heart, wanderings of the mind, distractions, wanderings of the mind, wanderings of the heart? Again and again being distracted by the 8 mundane concerns. So then there's no end to this wandering. If there's no end to this wandering, then there's no end in sight in terms of achieving true and lasting rest. It says, further, evil forces work and strain to cast us down into the states of woe. Manifold are false, deceptive trails, and it is hard to dissipate our doubts. Yeah, these doubts, dissipate doubts. What kind of doubts? Doubts that, maybe this works. Maybe we can be free from suffering. Maybe it's not so. We have these doubts that we cannot dissipate. Then, hard it is to find again the state of freedom. But we have found it, We have found it now. Harder yet to come upon teachers who can guide us. We have found. Hard indeed to turn aside the torrent of defilements. We have been able to do to some degree. So stop taking for granted these 3 hardships that we have been able to achieve. I mean, we take for granted these 3 conditions. And instead of really rejoicing in these 3, we get carried away by, oh, I have this problem, I have this problem, I have this problem, I have this problem. Yeah, if you want to count problems, there's no end to the problems that you can count. But you should look. I have found this state of freedom. I have found reliable guides. And I've been able to see how these mental defilements are not as powerful as I have come to believe them. It is possible to be free from them. So if we don't recognize these 3, if we don't rejoice in these 3, things, if we take for granted these three things, then at the end of 162, it says, alas, our sorrows fall in endless streams, like a torrent of rain that keeps falling to no end. So 162. And 163, alas, indeed, that living beings carried on the flood of bitter pain. So that those endless streams of sorrows, right, now is leading to a flood of bitter pain. However terrible their plight may be, do not perceive they suffer so. So what they're saying here is, it's not saying that they don't even know they are suffering. Well, sometimes that's the case, huh? But when they are suffering, they don't really understand the real problem at hand. So when they don't, and why, and what is that? That is not seeing how the mechanics of suffering are, how suffering comes about. When you don't see that, then there can be no end. So perceive this, see how all beings, this whole world with all its beings, are caught up in this delusion, in this confusion. And then towards them, this wish, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, this intensifies. This wish, this aspiration intensifies. And not understanding or seeing the true cause of suffering, what do we do? 164. They are like those who bathe themselves repeatedly and then proceed to scorch themselves with fire. So this is a very hot summer for those of us in the northern hemisphere, everywhere. So we bathe ourselves to cool down and then proceed to go scorch ourselves with fire. They suffer greatly in this way, yet there they stay, proclaiming loud their bliss. We are self-delusional. We deceive ourselves. One 165, likewise, there are those who live and act as though old age and death will never come to them. But first they are slain, and then there comes the dreadful fall into the states of loss. Yeah, that's basically all of us. We live and act as if, old age and death is just things that happen to others. And then we die. Not only that, we die and then we fall into dreadful state of loss. So up to 165, these are like the ordinary and then the middling compassion that we have to cultivate. So first is the kind of compassion that just quite naturally kind of arise when we see suffering and we don't want beings to suffer. So then we want to free them from suffering. Second, we begin to see more clearly the nature of that suffering, how it gets collected. When there's no self, we impute self, we fixate on self, and that's where suffering comes from. And if we want to be free from suffering, we have to work on that level. Beings need to understand that. So that's the second, the middling kind of compassion. So all of that will eventually lead us to, or not eventually as in magically, but we have to move in the direction of understanding more and more these teachings on emptiness, these teachings on how the nature of all things is like space, and we become Buddhists, we become awake. Then 166, 167, is when we are at that point where then merit, then our merit is so tremendously infinite that spontaneously now great compassion arises. And the most effective form of compassion is this great compassion that can effortlessly, without divide of subject and object, benefit all beings. So 166, 167 then takes us into chapter 10, the practice of making dedication. Mm. 166, 167. When shall I be able to allay and quench the dreadful heat of suffering's blazing fires, with plenteous rains of my own bliss that pour torrential from my clouds of merit? My wealth of merit gathered in with reverence, but without conceptual target. When shall I reveal this truth of emptiness to those who go to ruin through belief in real existence? And so here, phrased in terms of like Shantideva looking forward to the day, the time where he is Buddha, and describing that scenario, so to say. So he describes this, the state of Buddha where great compassion spontaneously manifest in terms of how when we can allay and quench the dreadful heat of suffering's blazing fires with the rains of your own bliss. So here we see again how, in fact, our self freed from the 8 mundane concerns and our ability to benefit beings, they are not two opposing results if we have bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, then these two things are two separate things that we feel like we have to choose. Do I choose my own liberation, or do I choose the liberation of others? But with bodhicitta, these two are two sides of the same coin. My achieving my own bliss also becomes the basis of the ability to quench the suffering of others through this bliss. My wealth of merit gathered in with reverence, but without conceptual target, I will dedicate. I will dedicate to others. I will dedicate to others freedom from confusion and suffering. My wealth of merit gathered in means like they are all completed when we're at the state of Buddha. Before at the state of Buddha, here it says we need to now think all my merit that have been amassed over this lifetime, over all lifetimes, I bring it all together. And now we have to do again the kind of conceptual contrived dedication. But this dedication is to be dedicated to a non-conceptual target. Conceptual aspects of merit should be dedicated to the non-conceptual, meaning dedicated to the attainment of Buddhahood, that which is beyond concepts. And he makes this final point here in relation to the topic of chapter 9. When shall I reveal this truth of emptiness to those who go to ruin through belief in real existence? Well, when? Well, to completely and effectively reveal this truth of emptiness, to be able to teach, to be able to guide others who are stuck in belief in real existence. When can we do this most effectively? When we are Buddhists. So here, we need to work on realizing the nature of phenomena, the nature of our minds, which is like space. In other words, emptiness. Only when we realize that do we not only have the necessary correct skill and wisdom and intelligence to effectively guide others. Also, only when we have a true understanding, perfect understanding of the nature of phenomena as emptiness, as suchness, as like space, only then can we do this otherwise impossible task of liberating infinite sentient beings. Great compassion is now at play. As long as compassion is still based on subject and object, which is necessarily where we are now, it will have limits. Our limits will be tested. Only at the Buddha state of great compassion that there are no limits. So again, Shantideva helps us see that if we have bodhicitta, then the two purposes, the two benefits, benefiting self and other, they are not two separate things. They are the same thing. And therefore, right, working on freeing ourselves from coming under the control of the eight mundane concerns is the very way, the most direct way that we can actually benefit beings. If done with bodhicitta. That's really important, a really important if, okay? So to summarize and encapsulate the whole path, we can say the whole path from this Bodhisattva path perspective is bodhicitta. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. So generating bodhicitta. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase higher. That is actualizing bodhicitta, increase higher and higher, the higher and higher, right? The and higher means completing bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta as the ground, the bodhicitta as the path or method, and the bodhicitta as result. And so with this, we enter into, Shantideva leads us to chapter 10, the chapter on dedication. As we shall see with the chapter on dedication, how, in fact, with the dedication of merit, we come one full circle. Because dedication of merit is, as it turns out, is looking at generation of bodhicitta from the other side. Perhaps that is why in one of the sutras, the Buddha declared, even with the initial generation of bodhicitta, the result, the path is achieved. Kind of a mysterious statement. Yeah, so today we will stop here and with the conclusion of the chapter on wisdom. Then we'll have a few more classes going through dedication. The chapter on dedication, not so much to talk about, but if we can, between now and next Tuesday when we meet again, that you start doing the dedication actually on chapter 10, like actually doing the dedication prayers, letting the dedication kind of sink into your heart. Then when we go over this chapter, then it'll be a lot more meaningful. Chanchu sem Rinpoche Ma ge ba nam ge gyu che ge ba nyam pa me ba ya gong ne gong du Bell Okay. Thank you so much, Tata. And we should rejoice and not take for granted how we have been able to go through this, almost this whole text already. Don't take for granted. Don't take for granted how many causes and conditions you have put together, you have brought together for this to happen. So make sure to dedicate all this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Sure. And there's work being done to edit all of this into, easier to use video and audio files. And so we just so that know that in the background, all kinds of volunteer work is going on. And so we also dedicate all of that.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Thank you, Waiting. Thank you, Antonio.